Imagine a battlefield stretching across thousands of kilometers. More than 11 million Soviet soldiers begin advancing across the steppe, while American armored divisions move to intercept them. Thousands of tanks roll forward, engines roaring like thunder across the land. Missiles ignite across the sky. Fighter jets scream overhead. Within minutes, the battlefield turns into chaos. This is no longer a regional conflict. This is the beginning of the largest military confrontation the modern world has ever seen. Across the endless plains, massive Soviet armored columns begin their advance. IS-3 tanks push forward beside heavier IS-4 machines, while the enormous IS-7 leads the spearhead of the offensive. Behind them, long lines of Object 140 tanks stretch across the horizon. Dust rises into the air like a moving storm cloud. The sound of engines fills the entire battlefield. The Soviet army is moving with unstoppable momentum toward the American defensive lines. American forces quickly respond. M1A2. Abrams tanks move into defensive positions across the battlefield. Advanced targeting systems lock onto approaching armored columns. Within seconds, the first shells are fired. Explosions tear through the front lines of the advancing Soviet armor. Smoke begins to rise above the battlefield. Steel crashes against steel as both armies commit thousands of vehicles to the fight. Suddenly, the sky above the battlefield erupts with sound. American F-15 Eagle fighter jets break through the clouds at high speed. Their radars immediately detect Soviet aircraft approaching from the east. Missiles ignite beneath the wings of the fighters. White smoke trails stretch across the sky. Within moments, the first aerial battle begins above the massive armored war raging below. The Soviet military responds by activating powerful air defense systems. Large missile launchers rise from hidden positions behind the armored lines. Surface-to-air missiles launch into the sky in brilliant bursts of fire. The missiles streak upward toward the approaching aircraft. Explosions appear in the clouds as both sides struggle for control of the airspace above the battlefield. Then, something new appears above the battlefield. Small, fast-moving aircraft begin circling above the armored columns. These are reconnaissance and strike drones. They scan the battlefield and identify high-value targets. Moments later, missiles launch from the drones toward the advancing Soviet tanks. Explosions ripple across the armored formations as this new technology begins to change the battle. Despite the drone attacks, the Soviet armored army continues its advance. Massive IS-7 heavy tanks move forward through smoke and fire. Object 140 tanks spread across the battlefield, attempting to flank the American defenses. Shells explode across the terrain, while both armies maneuver for position. The battlefield becomes a maze of burning vehicles, dust clouds, and continuous explosions. High above the battlefield, a new threat begins to appear. Large strategic bomber formations enter the sky. American B-52 bombers move forward, escorted by F-15 fighter jets. From the opposite direction, Soviet Tu-95 bombers approach the battlefield. Two massive bomber fleets are now moving toward the same airspace above the war below. As the bomber formations close in the air, war intensifies dramatically. Fighter jets from both sides collide in fast-moving aerial combat. Missiles streak across the sky, leaving long trails of smoke. One aircraft explodes in the distance, while another spirals downward in flames. Hundreds of pilots are now fighting for control of the sky above the battlefield. Moments later, the bombing begins. Large explosive payloads fall from the strategic bombers toward the battlefield below. Massive explosions erupt across the terrain as shock waves roll through armored formations. Entire sections of the battlefield disappear beneath fire and smoke. The scale of destruction grows larger with every passing minute. Even after the bombing, the battle refuses to stop. American Abrams tanks push forward through the smoke while Soviet heavy armor continues advancing. Burning wreckage now covers large parts of the battlefield. Yet new waves of tanks keep arriving from both sides. The war machine continues moving despite the destruction surrounding it. Once again, drones return to the sky above the battlefield. Missiles launch from multiple directions as fighter jets roar overhead. Land forces, air power, and advanced technology are now fully combined in this massive conflict. The battlefield has become one enormous zone of fire, steel, and explosions. But even this enormous battle may only be the beginning. More forces are preparing to enter the war. New weapons are being deployed. And the next phase of this conflict could become even more devastating than what has already happened. The question now remains unanswered. Who will ultimately win this war between the United States and the Soviet Union?